Hi, everybody. I am working on a experiment with Claude Code as an interface for making a normalized critical addition from the text of Adam Wotum with two witnesses and companion translation. And the experiment is just thinking about the interface in which we make these decisions as a sort of conversation or a prompt and response rather than editing XML files directly. That's often been a hurdle to getting people to think about our additions as data. Um, Certainly, people are a little bit uncomfortable with editing the XML directly. And so the idea here is, what if the editor's just in charge of making decisions, right? And all of the mechanics of inserting and recording those decisions in the right place at in the right spot with the right syntax is handled by an LLM agent, right? And that's increasingly possible. I also think like even someone who's comfortable with it, it's starting to be a lot because you might have three or four witnesses, and if you need to make changes in the right space, it's like a lot of tabs to manage and a lot of different kind of things you need to navigate. So there's a lot of friction with that. So there's this idea that like if we can give Claude enough context, it knows where to make these changes in the right place at the right time, and the editor can focus on making the decisions. So I'll just describe what you see in this window right now. It still obviously looks a little complicated to people, but if you can kind of get a sense of the what's trying to be achieved, you might be able to think about how it could look cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. Um, but on the top, we have different context things that the user might want to look at when they're making their decision. For example, um, a collation table, right? And so as we move from paragraph to paragraph, we can get a different collation table. We can see how the witnesses vary, and we can even inspect the manuscript image line for each transcription, or we can see that over here. Now, in this middle section, which is eventually what we sort of want to make um, something that happens that the user doesn't even need to look at, right? Would be all the files that are getting edited. So we have one file where variants and the decisions are being recorded. We have the normalized critical text. We have an English translation, right? And so you can see that I'm on this paragraph here and we're moving to this paragraph here. And even behind these, we have the corresponding paragraphs in each witness and diplomatic transcriptions. And it's this data that gets used for this collation table, right? So the idea is like increasingly we don't want to have to edit any of these directly. All of these edits are gonna, or even see them. All of these edits are gonna are gonna be done by the machine. So we'll try to look at that as little as possible, and we're gonna just make that kind of small, right? And so it's there if we want to look at it. But what we actually want to see is kind of this conversation, and we're going to be informed about what's going to be changed each time, and we can kind of have a conversation about that. So we're starting on this paragraph here, 119, and the first thing that we're going to do is create a draft English translation so we can look at that, and that looks good. And the next thing that Claude's going to do is, okay, now I'm going to look at the differences between these texts. Basically, what a human's looking at here as a visualization, we're going to give a machine readable version of this collation table to the LLM so that it can then walk us through each of the variants in this table and we can make decisions about that. Right? So we'll say, yes, make that. And we'll just see how this goes. Okay, so consistent with what we can see, there is one variant found. And now we can do a couple things. Um, we can make different decisions from this. We get some suggestions from the LM itself. Um, right? It says that we have this as an add in the witness itself, right? We notice that it's actually added right here. So Claude's paying attention to that. We notice that Maz it has it absent. Um, we can have Claude inspect the image itself. We can ask it to view the image so that we can see it bigger here. I don't think that's necessary because I already saw it. We can skip it. And I'm going to choose the addition here. So um, let me just ask, I could even ask Claude for a little bit of help here. I think one is the best option. What do you think? Right. So it kind of helps us, gives us a little translation to help us out, more explicit. Um, yes, and I typically have a preference for the more explicit reading, so we'll leave that at his note, right? So I'll say, okay, let's do one with this note. Right, so we're making kind of a commentary or annotation on our critical apparatus with each. So it's going to show me the proposed changes. So we're going to normalize the text to this. Okay. Um, it's going to summarize. We've removed stuff that's relevant to the diplomatic transcription, right? All of that looks good to me. Proof. And it's going to show us a diff of the changes it's going to make. I like those changes, so I'm gonna and it's already kind of shown us those here, so I'm gonna say yes for the future because I don't necessarily want to tab. This as a gamble. I don't want to be in the editor. I just want to see this and approve it. So we'll do that. Press two there, so we shouldn't have that again. All right, so now since we've made some normalized text, we got any proposed changes to um, the English translation. On the contrary, no one who has been appointed master of his own will, right? So we're using has been appointed for constitutus, is able, can begin a new life unless he repents of his old life. Maybe I don't want the dash, so we can make a minor change. Let's do life, comma, therefore, instead of the dash. We could make that change directly, but the experiment here is to think about doing this without editing or forcing someone to edit the XML themselves. So it's going to show us that diff again. I'm going to say yes, looks good. All right, now we're going to record our decisions. So looks like this, right? Here's our annotation or our commentary on that variant. Here's the position of that variant in each witness, right? And we can approve that. Okay, and so that's what that looks like there. And we can say, yes, do this for the rest of the session. Looks good. All right, so we're just moving paragraph by paragraph to see how this goes. So let's just do another one. Yep. Yes. I want our visual collation table to change. So maybe let me just move down here. Okay. And we can look at the paragraph there. And pretend like we don't need to see that at all. All right, so it's running. It's going to probably ask us to create um, a draft translation first, and then we'll start working through the variants. A little slow as the paragraph gets longer. There's a lot more for it to think about. Um, that can be, we can change the thinking to low or use a different model, but that might affect performance. So, um, yeah, shouldn't take too much longer. There we go. Oh, so it thinks that there are some errors here in this JSON file. It's nice that it's checking that. All right, so it had an error there of its own making. Interesting. It's gonna just test to make sure that file is valid now. All right, now we're gonna go on to the next paragraph here. All right, so we get a draft translation. That's nice. And let's just read that. It should be said that yes, um, because such a person could come to it, or whenever it came to them, every such person is bound to be contrite, at least virtually or formally, as I have declared elsewhere on in the first book, on the first book. Um, that's probably fine for now. Uh, okay, and now we're going to get our variant list. I can already see some, so I'm going to start checking them. Quia posset versus um, posset versus pos posset. Okay, and just a orthography check. Occurret occur. That should be. Here's a place where we actually have a transcription error. So no, it's okay. Occur val. And but there's a transcription error. We should have two C's there. So here's an example of how we'll like that's going to need to be changed in the diplomatic transcription. So this is a nice place where like I don't have to go find that. We can say, look, uh well, first we'll do this one. Because versus C. Should we said that since it would then be possible, I think quia makes more sense. Quia posset makes more sense. I think. It even suggests a note for me, so that's fine with, yep, that's fine. Yes, option two with note. All right, now we move on to the next variant. Um, so it's already ignoring this because it thinks it's a just an orthographic change, which is fine, but we'll um, before we do this variant, I think there is a transcription error in Maz for array. I can ask it to double check it. So here we go. Inspect the image and confirm that Maz has a array. So now it's going to download the line for that, and it's going to try to use its own vision capacity to sort of transcribe that and see if it really should be a cur array. So here you can see it getting the URL for that image. And now it's loaded it for us, right? We can see it nice and clear here. Two C's, URRERE. And now it's going to read that image here. Maybe not really necessary, but because it's obvious to me, but it's kind of interesting to have a little bit of second opinion. And I think that it's wrong here, so um, I think you're wrong. You're wrong. There are actually two C's here. Can you update a transcription in Mavs to read occur array? So, I can go into this file and edit it myself, but the whole idea here is to not have to do that. So you see that it found the right paragraph, it found the right line, and it's making that single, that's pretty nice. That saves a lot of tab clicking and friction, right? So that's good. And we'll come back. And now we're going to come back to that variant we had before, which is this one. All right, so that'll go away next time it gets refreshed. And now we want to read this because if it were able to happen to them or when it would happen to them, just as it had in the preceding question, um, you know, I don't think that's so bad because it gives us a reference and it's more explicit. Let's include this one, and I'll just leave my note preference for more explicit reading. Right, so now we're moving faster. I knew that with my note. This is here we'll just say to preference for SORV when the meaning is the same. Just now we have declaravi versus explanum. Let's ask if it has any preference here. Any preference here? Maybe we should check this. Is the transcription correct? Explanum, yeah, and declaravi. How about we say any semantic difference here? If not, we'll default to sort. Yeah, that's what I thought, right? Explanavi, I mean, we could, and now that we look at that, explanum doesn't make any sense, and that we can read that as explanavi. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're correct. Explana, explanavi is a better transcription. Can we correct that in the MAS transcription? And then Go with declar, go with the sorb reading. uh, in the break text. Right, that's really helpful. All right, so it's gonna now it's gonna be edited in like three files. So I don't have to do. It's gonna change the MAS file. It's gonna change the critical file. Right, so we get this correction here. Looks great. And now we're gonna just wants to double check. Um, so it's a preference for sorb. I mean, good. It says a summary of what happened. Summary of the normalized text we're going to have now. It's added this punctuation. We're just double checking that. Um, we can start adding some ref stuff. Looks good. We can also add a ref tag around cross-reference. Didn't know what to do with that, but let's see. Um, no, I mean, we have it here and here. Um, I think there are two, let's be more explicit, two ref recipient questione and ref alias Vibram. Creates my IDs for me. Looks good. I had to be a little bit more explicit, but looks good. But you can see how it's still more friendly to the person. It's not just the person who doesn't want to edit XML. We're dealing with like 5 or 6 files now, so it's nice to just have to not jump around. Yes, we'll make those edits. It must be said yes, because such a person could come to it or whenever it came to them. Um, uh, I could say like this translation is a little odd, could come to it. The meaning of could come to it or whenever it came to them is a little unclear. Yeah, we can make this better. Might need to think about the paragraph before. So here we could talk about making this translation like more explicit. Certainly adding stuff to the Latin, but it must be said because the occasion for the contrition could present itself to such a person, or whenever it did present itself, has been established in the preceding question. Every such person is bound to be contrite, at least virtually formally. Um, I think that's fine. Obviously, we're going to go through this translation again once we have our decision made. It's a helpful start. Here we have it. Here. Just gotta make that change. So it made that change. And now we're gonna save our commentary on those annotations. So again, like most people aren't gonna want to make these files themselves, but we're getting a lot of data saved about the position of the variant. Um, we need to, um, and I think we need to push it just a little bit. Are we getting the word range for the first variant? Token range. Here we probably should have token position, token position 8. Um, yeah, token range. Oh, this is no range here. Token position. We have 2, so this should be a range. Range for the first variant. I only see one number. All right, so we just need to nudge it, update the skill a little bit to make sure it's doing that. But um, yes, okay, it looks better. So now we've got a token range for these variants. This one was omitted before. Good, good. Yep. Now it's going to make sure there's no errors in our JSON file there. All right, so we just did 2 paragraphs. If we want to look at them, we can see what we've done here. We did this one, got normal. Well, this is one we just did, and we did this one here. And here we have our translation. We've got the variant list here, so all of these can be attached to the file, and we've got some transcription improvements as we went. We fixed a cur array, for example, right here. We fixed um, explanami. That was a great catch and help with Claude code. Right? So I think that's a good place to stop. It gives you a sense of what it'd be like to edit all these files without editing them directly, right? But through this a new kind of interface. I mean, eventually you can do this with your voice, right? You can say, make this change, make that change. And you have the ability of the LLM to call up a lot of resources for you to inspect that otherwise might be, instead of clicking buttons and going to places, you just say, show me this line, show me this variant. And the last thing we could just kind of point out is like, what has to be in place for it to be able to do all those things? Let's just look at the skills that exist that we've created to do these. So, um, these are all um, skills that I've created: show line, align paragraphs, normalize addition, inspect transcription line, flag transcription code. So, uh, these have more explicit instructions, and I want to say, show me the line, right? It knows what to do. I mean, I think the other thing that we might mention is that in order for these to work, right, these services that it's using have to be set up. So like the collation table service, um, or it's not even a table, but just the collation, right? You can see that there's a service running here, right? And it sends the witnesses there, and that service sends back the variants, and then it parses those variants. So that's how it gets these kinds of lists. So all those things have to be kind of in place for this to work, right? Similarly, we have services that like show line, right? So if I click on the line, that's why I'm able to see these lines. So those are services that are in place. So there's a lot of layers below it, but once all those layers are in place, that's what makes it possible to kind of move through it in this conversational way rather than editing XML files directly. I think that's a good place to stop. I think you have the sense of what's how I'm experimenting with that, and feel free to email me or leave a comment if you got some ideas or questions. Thanks for watching.